everyone. In today's class, we're going to look into elements of research. Right, within the elements of research, right, we are going to look into these four topics. Right, four major topics in elements of research would be concept and constructs, and then independent, dependent variables, nature of measurement, and also levels of measurement. Right, these four aspects, these four topics are very essential to quantitative research methods. Right, if you are a researcher and you want to embark on quantitative research, right, so these are the elements. Right, these four elements are very important, right, for you to understand and learn, and then for you to later use them in your research. Right, so what is basically concepts and constructs? Right, before we go into definition, so how do you come up with concepts and constructs? Right, first and foremost, right, it comes, most of the time it comes from your research question, research problem, right, maybe research objective. Right, these three main criteria, right, these three main aspects will help you to formulate or to come up with concepts and constructs. Right, here you are responsible, right, you are put to task to determine the relevant variables to the situation. Right, we'll look into it, what is variable is all about. Right, prior to that, this is concepts or constructs are intermediary steps. Right, it is hypothesis and post research problem, question, or objective. Right, by determining the specific variables, right, that are pertinent to each defined problem or question that need to be answered, right, your concept are later converted to become variables. Right, on the other hand, constructs will be concepts or idea about an object, attribute, or phenomenon that are worthy of measurement. Right, the problem with concepts and constructs is that they are preliminary, prior to measurement. So when it's a concept or construct, it's difficult for you to measure. Right, why it's important for you to measure? Right, basically quantitative research methods emphasize for numbers. Right, it needs numerical or statistical evidence, so you have to convert them, or what we call in its very own term, we call it operationalizing the concepts and constructs. Okay, right, basically concept would be converted so that it can be measured. Right, it is basically what you call, before we begin here, right, it is mental images or perceptions that vary markedly from individual to individual. Right, these variables later can be measured. Right, of course they have varying degrees of accuracy depending upon the measurement scale that you want to use much later. Right, we abstract such meanings from our experiences and use words as labels to designate them. Right, for example, right, besides this, how do we identify a person is running, walking, skipping, crawling, or hopping? Right, the movement, right, maybe the pace or the composure defines what is running, what is walking, skipping, crawling, or hopping, for instance. Right, besides that, right, maybe when we speak about the impact of e-learning, for instance, right, how do we want to measure the impact? Right, we're going to conduct an online exam in the end of the semester to evaluate whether the students have performed well, so that we can measure the impact of e-learning, right? Whether there's a progress or not, right? When we speak about progress, what is progress? Do they have to score a mark above 70 and above so that we can consider them as progress or success, right? Right? Maybe being successful in life, right? Those are concepts, right? Successful are concept. It's a concept. So how do we define that? It's very different from your perception and my perception, right? Maybe for a person, being successful is considered to have a lot of money, right? Maybe the other person would think leading a happy life is considered as being successful, right? This differs from each and every individual. So therefore, you have to standardize them into variables that you can test and measure, so that you can measure and test upon them much later, right? Right. So basically, concepts are subjective impression, right, and also open to subjective impression, right? So there's no uniformity to its understanding among different people, right? Effectiveness of face-to-face teaching, right? What a lecturer might perceive effectiveness in face-to-face teaching might differ to a student, right? Satisfaction of, let's say, eating McDonald's, right? How do you want to define or create a uniformity in testing what is satisfaction? Is the person buying a McDonald's each day, right? Every day, for instance, or would we consider the person is less satisfied with the services if the number of time he or she visits a McDonald's outlet is reduced, right? Something that you can convert and later can be measured, right? Concepts as it is are difficult to measure, right? These are the things that are very subjective, right? Open to interpretation, right? So therefore, it's very important for them to be converted into variables. You can either directly convert them into something that can be measured, right? Or you develop a set of indicators, right? Something that indicates that they can be later, that we'll look into that in a short while, right? Right? A concept is an abstraction form from generalization from practical observation, right? Like, for instance, academic achievement, right? Abstracted or generalized from activities children must do school, learn in school, right? Maybe co-curriculum, maybe academic activities, a set of exams of different subjects and so on, right? Reading, writing, calculation, drawing, picture, this all comes under educational activities, right? If therefore, let's say the students only excel in these three parts, maybe reading, writing, and calculation, and quite disadvantaged with drawing pictures, right? Extracurricular activities, right? So then consider them of having a poor academic achievement, right? These are the things that you have to emphasize, right? So the concept, basically academic achievement, captures all these activities, right? More than this as well, right? So when you're operationalizing, you have to mention maybe reading more than 5 books, or the proficiency in reading, or the fluency in reading is measured, right? Writing, how good is the writing, whether there are grammar mistakes and so on, right? This is how to operationalize it, right? Construct, right? Construct is also another form of concepts, right? It's very similar to concept, right? They are deliberately and consciously created, right? So that they have a scientific purpose as systematic, right? right? So most of the abstract concepts, right, are difficult to visualize, like personality of a person, right? Whether you're talking about the physical, about or talking about the innate quality, the inner quality, right? Maybe the compassion, if the person is compassionate, right? Is being passionate with something, right? Being humble, being kind, and so on, right? So those are abstract concepts that you must later convert into a concept, and then only you can operationalize those things, right? Right. This are we speaking about the operational definition, basically, right? That in conceptual definition, you must explain what does it mean, right? What does it mean to, what does it mean of being academically competent, right? Have achieved, right? What you call it? Academically have achieved, right? What does it mean, right? And then later, when you operationalize them, after providing a clear definition, you have to designate a particular measurement instrument to represent the concept, right? Maybe more than 90 marks is considered as have achieved their academic qualification, right? Academically achieved, for instance, right? So these are the things that you have to clearly define, right? So that you would be able to write a concrete analysis, right? Right. All right. This is not important for the subjects, right? This is we have covered in the previous chapter, right? Right. So this is the basic example, right? How do you want to convert concepts into variables, right? For example, if you take the concept of rich or being poor, right? So let's say if you don't want this indicator, right? You already have an idea, right? How you want to convert them into variables, right? Operationalize them into how you're going to measure them, right? So let's say you are not very sure about the variables. So once you have the concept, you try to generate their indicators, right? So maybe you want to evaluate the income and value of all the assets, right? And then how do you convert them into variables? So when we say about income, are we going to calculate their annual income, or you're going to calculate their per month income, or you're going to calculate about 2 years one, right? Something like that. And then value of their assets, their total assets, right? Maybe a poor person doesn't have their own home, right? They may be renting, so it doesn't come under assets, right? Maybe the car is still under loan, right? They're still paying their interest, they're still paying their monthly installments, right? It's not considered as their assets yet, right? So whether they have investment and so on, right? So how do you consider your respondent is rich, right? Maybe you establish that their income is more than 200,000 per annum, right? Maybe the total value asset is more than 2 million, for instance, right? So these are the things that help you to measure much later, right? Much later when you are accumulating data and you want to process them, right? So since we spoke about high academic achievement as well, right? Performance in the examinations, practical work, industrial training, internship, right? Tutorial presentations, and then you accumulate them overall performance, right? So you have the variables. So the marks, right? Their marks in examination, practical work, tutorial, and overall marks, right, will define whether the person can be considered as a high academic achiever, right? Maybe if between 60 to 84, right, the person is considered average, for instance. Below than for 60, consider poor, for instance, right? So these are the examples how you can convert concepts into variables, right? So this is what we call the process of operationalization. It's safe for you to always come up with the indicators, right? Of course, the choice of indicators also might vary from researcher to researcher, from individual to individual. But of course, but you must make sure that it has a logical link with the concept, right? Of course, rich and poor. Talk about rich and poor, you cannot talk about maybe the number of books that they read in a week, right? It doesn't make sense, right? So something that has logical link, something that is has a connection with the concept, right? When we speak about high academic achievement, we cannot talk about assets, for instance, right? Right, something that's not totally relatable should be excluded, right? Of these are easy examples, right? Some concepts might be difficult for you to convert them into variables as well, but you have to make sure that you are able to come up with variables, right? Okay, so when we speak about variables, right? So now we have seen what are concepts and why you need to convert them into variables. But what are variables, right? Variables may operate in these ways, right? They are responsible for bringing about change in the phenomenon, right? Outcome variables, the effects, impacts or consequences of a change variable, right? They can affect or influence the link between cause and effect variables, right? Or they can also connect or link different variables, right? Right. These are some concepts, right? Or constructs as well. Your mindset, right? Certain criteria, certain feelings, right? How, but what we define, how do you define that I did not sleep well? What is well? Is it something that considered more than 8 hours can be considered as sleeping well? Or I do not like this, right? So what are the things that must be complemented so that you would like certain things, right? So in professional context, right, we want to claim that a program is effective or not effective, right? Providing a quality service to our clients and all those things, right? But how do we measure this effectiveness, right? How do you want to measure whether a program is effective, or not, right? Right, there are judgments that require sound basis on which to proclaim, right? So you must measure the effectiveness, right? Maybe you want to claim that the e-learning method is an effective program, right? How do you measure that? As we spoke earlier, whether we want to look into the marks during the end of the semester and so on, right? So how many hours are invested for you to learn, for you to grasp the teachings in e-learning, truly e-learning method, right? So these concepts would be converted into variables for you to measure them, right? So these are the basic four causal relationships in variables, right? Independent variable is the cause supposed for bringing about changes in a phenomenon or situation. All right. Independent variable would be introduced in your research. All right. That would eventually bring changes, right? It will affect your results in phenomenal situation, right? Dependent variable is the outcome or changes brought by introduction of an independent variable. Let's say if I introduce the number of doctors in a hospital and you want to analyze whether the number of patients have reduced, right? Or the number of patients that has been cured, right? So independent variable would be the number of doctors, and dependent variable the number of patients that have been treated or has been reduced, for instance. So extraneous variables, several other factors operating in a real life situation may affect changes in the dependent variable. We'll look into the examples shortly, right? Connecting or linking where necessary in situations to complete the relationship between cause and effect variables. Right, the examples, right? Let us assume that smoking is a cause of cancer, right? So these are the dependent variables. So we are assuming that smoking would lead to cancer, right? What are the extraneous variables that we cannot control, right? Age of the person, for example, age of the person, extent of his smoking, right? Duration of smoking, whether this person is smoking about like 3 packs of cigarettes a day, right? Like how many times does the person smoke in his entire life, for instance, right? So these are the extraneous variables, right? This would affect the relationship, right? Right, so in study design we have two, right? One is active variables that can be manipulated, changed, or controlled, right? For instance, let's say different teaching models, right? You want to analyze the impact of teaching, right? So you analyze, first you try face-to-face teaching, and then you try e-learning, or then you go on with various techniques or models, right? And then attribute variables that cannot be manipulated or changed or controlled by the researcher, right? So for instance, age, gender, education, and income, right? Right. For example, right? So study intervention, right? Different teaching models, experimental intervention, program service, and so on, right? So the attribute variables are beyond the control of a researcher, and this is within the control of a researcher, right? So these are the research, quantitative research, right? So these are the aspects that requires you to formulate concepts, come up with concepts, and then convert them into variables so that you can test them, measure them, and then later test your hypothesis, right? So nature of measurement, right? Basically, right? What are the why do you need to measure them, right? So whether are there significant differences between what you call qualitative and quantitative, right? So the basic difference between qualitative and quantitative is that qualitative uses descriptive statements to seek answers to the research questions, right? Quantitative research, on the other hand, usually sought on one of the measurement scales. It could be nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio, right? It complies with the measurement scales, while qualitative is not, right? If information is not collected using one of the scale at the time of data collection, it is transformed into variables by using these measurement scales at the time of analysis. Right, so with these measurement scales, right, it is assumed that are considered to be more refined, objective, and accurate. So without the measurement scales, then what do you call the data that has been accumulated would be very subjective, right? So for instance, nominal and ordinal scales are considered very subjective compared to interval or ratio. We'll look into why is it considered so, right? Why there are differences between nominal and ordinal, ordinal, and interval or ratio, right? We'll look into that. Okay. All right, nominal and ordinal scales are considered subjective because they do not have unit of measurement per se. All right, for instance, right, we cannot measure the place of living, right? If you see here, right, where do you live, right? You cannot quantify them, right? You cannot measure anything out of this, right? Their gender, their habitat, their place of living, right? Their car, brand of the car they are driving, right? Or their political affiliations and so on, right? So they are not there to be measured, right? Right, so basically the individuals, objects or responses are divided into a number of subgroups in such a way that each member of the subgroup shares a common characteristic or a property, right? Mostly we do nominal scale that you want to categorize them into, or you want to group them into, group them accordingly. Maybe you want to uh, group the people who lives in house compared to car in a two different categories, right? Or male and female into different categories, so that you have the numbers of your respondent. Where are they, right? They are demographic questions, for instance, right? Right, normally the name that you choose for your subgroups, right, or subcategory, right, it's best if you choose something that describes the characteristic of the subcategory, like for instance gender, right, their profession, for instance, right, and so on and so forth, right. Right, you can collect nominal scale data, right, something like where do you live. You can be also open-ended, it can be also multiple question, right. It's easy for you to collect or gather this data, right? And then we have ordinal scale, right. Right, it also has the characteristics of nominal scale. It is arranged either in ascending or descending order. All right, for example, income can be measured, right, the income, right? And we have, yeah, income can be measured either quantitatively or qualitatively by using subcategories like above average, average, below average, and below average, right. Right, here you also can group them according to subcategories in order of the magnitude of the property, right. Maybe you want to start from below average to above average, right. You want to subcategorize them accordingly, right. Right, maybe beside income you want to put them into socioeconomic status, for instance, right. Or you can also measure attitudes, right, like whether they strongly agree, uncertain, disagree, and so on, right. Whether you are satisfied with Starbucks, for instance, right. And the order is relevant to the result, and so is their naming. So if they intend to obtain more information than what they will collect using nominal scale, they can use also ordinal scale. Like maybe you already group them into groups that drink Starbucks and coffee bean, for instance, and then you want to extract the data whether they are satisfied with the drink, right, or which company they are most satisfied, right, something on that line, right. Right, of course the difference between variables cannot be calculated, right, so the experience and the own understandings are different, right. And then we have interval scale, right. These are when we're talking about real quantitative studies, right, defined as a numerical scale where the order of the variable is known as well as the difference between these variables, right. It indicates distance or differences between the two scales, right, between the two entities, right. For instance, between the degrees, right, you can measure them, you can calculate them. Let's say when you introduce factor A, then it is 80 degrees. Then you introduce factor B, then it reduces to 50 degrees. So you can calculate, you can do a calculation between these, all right. So it has all the characteristics over all the properties of ordinal scale, and it has unit of measurement with an arbitrary starting and terminating point, right. It has an arbitrary zero because negative values of temperature do exist, right. It is very mathematical, very numerical as well, right. For instance, your family income, what is the temperature in your city, and so on, right. Ratio scale, of course, it has all the properties of nominal, ordinal, and interval, all the scales that we have looked before, and it also has a starting point fixed at 0, right. What we call is an absolute scale, right? The difference between the intervals is always measured from a 0 point, right? This means that ratio scale can be used for mathematical operations. Measurement of age, or income, height, and weight are examples of this scale, right? For example, right, a person who is 40 years of age is twice as old as a 20-year-old, right? A person earning 60,000 per year earns 3 times the salary of a person earning 20,000, right? There are differences that you can calculate, right? Maybe weight and height in a market research, right? How ratio scale is used to calculate market share, or you want to predict the price of a future product, right? Whether there's an increase in demand and so on, right? Right, you use statistical techniques, right? Later on, we'll statistical softwares, right, like SPSS and so on, for you to calculate the central tendency. What is the average response? Where are the people's inclination? Where's their interest and so on, right? Right. So these are the things that you can use, right? All right. So for today, right? So I'll provide you with tasks for tutorial task, right? So besides the lecture slide, I also hope that you could be able to do some readings, right? Do some online readings. If you have books, then go through the books, right? Enrich your information, right? So that we could have discussions much later, right? All right, thank you.